I think really the worry is that they will taste the same. An article also said that the Chinese leaf celery tastes more like an herb or tastes more like parsley, and it is also more related to wild celery, which is called, let's say it's called smallage or smallage, okay? Hi everyone, welcome back to another New Ingredient Monday, where on certain Mondays, as you all know now, we take a new ingredient and we explore it in the kitchen. I taste it, I tell you how it tastes, we talk about, different cooking applications for it, just learn a little bit about a new ingredient. And I always think that that really helps with you all cooking your recipes and finding new ways to use these ingredients as well. So after you watch this, if you're somebody that has used the ingredient before or know a little bit more about it, definitely, comment below. Everybody wants to learn about new ingredients. So today, we had a viewer, an audience member that was like, hey, would you mind trying out Chinese celery for New Ingredient Mondays? And I just so happened to be in London's Chinatown, and I saw Chinese celery. I think in the past, when I have needed to use Chinese celery for, like stir fry or some kind of dish, normally I would just substitute, Western celery for it. The worry is that they kind of taste exactly the same, and then I will have wasted like 5 pounds on celery. Okay, so first up, I'm going to talk a little bit about Chinese celery first. I know everybody wants me to get to the tasting. Chinese celery, it is called leaf celery or nanling celery, and actually it's from the same family as Western celery. So they have actually many things in common. Typically grown in East Asian countries. I wrote it down, hold on. I guess the difference is that usually both the stems and the leaves are used. So that's one of the kind of the biggest differences. I imagine for Western celery, we would use it that way too if we weren't in the tradition of being very wasteful and just chopping off leaves or chopping off things and not eating the whole plant. So I imagine potentially, both of them we use the leaf and the stems for. I mean, if you grow your own celery, I'm sure that you use the leaves as well. So you can see that physically one of the biggest differences is just this one is a lot thicker. Western celery, the stalk, the stem is a lot thicker than the Chinese celery, which is really thin. So if you're going to be making celery sticks, I imagine this one is going to be nicer. But different articles also talked about this part of the Chinese celery is rounder, and also potentially the stem is hollow in the middle. But they did mention that there were different kinds of Chinese celery. So some were hollow in the middle, whereas some were not. So I'm not totally sure about this one. This one pretty much, the inside anyways, it looks like just normal Western celery, but just smaller, just thinner. It has its little concavity on the inside. So that pretty much looks the same. In the Chinese celery family, there is green Chinese celery or green leaf celery, and then there's also a white leaf celery. I know I want to get my hands on that one too, but I've only seen pictures. I just learned about it. I don't think that I saw it at the Chinese grocery store, but I could try next time. They say that the green one has more flavor. It's more compact in flavor, which really brings us to how do the flavors differ. So according to online articles, Chinese celery, leaf celery, both the stem and the leaves are a lot more flavorful. It is a much stronger celery flavor, kind of that anisey, fennel-y type flavor, which potentially makes sense because these are smaller. Perhaps everything is more compact and the flavor is more compact. So that makes sense. And we talked about this having a white version to it, but I think what is that process called where we purposely do not give a plant light so that the chlorophyll doesn't develop and it doesn't turn green and it doesn't get, kind of bitter or whatnot? I forgot what that's called. What is that called? We do it to asparagus. I don't know what it's called. I think that is also practiced on celery. So maybe it can have a more deep flavor as well. But anyways, there's certainly more water in this. It's just a bigger being. It's a more juicy being. This one very much looks like it's like stockier, though I have not tried it yet. Culinarily, Chinese leaf celery, rarely served raw. In Chinese cooking, we tend to not really eat many things raw. I think just cooking it off, you know, making sure that it's okay to eat is something that we normally practice. So there's not that, we don't eat that many things like raw, like, you know, cucumbers and whatnot, but we don't eat that many things raw. So that could be another reason that it isn't eaten raw. For both varieties, the seeds are used as herbs. The seeds are medicinal as well. Past culinary uses, Chinese celery has been used as a diuretic, a juice for jaundice, replacing your electrolytes, high blood pressure, as well as digestive problems. But I think Western celery probably can be used the same way. From what I've seen online, usually Chinese celery used for stir fries, you kind of cut them into, you know, sticks, and then you stir fry it with a protein. You know, it could be tofu as well, so maybe we'll do a recipe like that together, stir fried Chinese celery and tofu. But it's usually like Chinese celery and chicken and something like celery and protein stir fry. Some Vietnamese dishes where they'll use the whole celery for something like a soup and a soup stock. So that makes sense as well, just kind of using this more as like a flavorful vegetable or a flavorful herb. Okay, so let's go in for the taste test. What I have done is very thoroughly, I have divided up the celery into the stems and the stalks. Okay, so Chinese celery, Western celery, and then I found some leaves from Western celery, and then I have the leaves from the Chinese celery, and I thought that we would taste it that way, since, you know, you get to use the whole stalk, and we can try it out that way. So first up, let us do the Chinese. Sorry, did I wash this that well? All right, the Chinese celery stalk. Okay. I'm gonna taste the Western celery for reference, but first impression is that texturally, I actually think that it tastes very similar to Western celery. It actually was not like super fibrous, it was not super hard. It actually just had the same texture, it was just smaller. But I did feel like yes, it had more celery flavor in that it did taste kind of a bit more bitter. Not a bit, actually, it tasted bitter. And then kind of strangely, after the bitterness, there was like a tinge of tanginess. So there's like a little bit of sour, ever so slightly, there too. So it's interesting. Here you go, this one. You know how some people say, like, you know, some people say people that like fish and people that like chicken actually just don't really like the flavor of meat, so why do they eat it anyways? After tasting this just kind of tastes like water. It tastes like watered down celery. Like this is like 10% of the flavor of this. The rest is just water, the rest is just really nice crunch. You know, I could very much see why you would put this in a salad or you know, have it as a snack, because, you know, that kind of mouthfeel is nice. But I pretty much actually think that this tastes sweet, slightly sweet, and not even bitter. It's just, yeah, 10% of the flavor of this. It's not necessarily bitter, it's just bitter in that, like, you know, greens type of way, in that, you know, celery type of way. So yeah, actually the second time around it was easier to handle. It's not as bitter. Now let's try the leaves. Let me try the Western leaves first. I had thought that maybe originally the leaves would look slightly different, but actually in comparing, I don't know if you can see, in comparing just like the shapes and how, you know, the edges of the leaves are shaped, they're the same things. I will have some of the leaves. Weird. So this is a Western one. I can see why people don't use the leaves, and I don't know if this is true for all Western celery. When you first bite it, there's not actually, like, you think it's a mellow flavor. And then the bitterness comes. The bitterness in the form of like a slightly minty, but bitter. It's bitter with like a tinge of mint. A tinge of that like numbing, minty flavor. I wouldn't necessarily say it is like bitter tasting celery. I kind of feel like it's bitter. Interesting. We'll go back to that. Okay, I should get some water. My cousin made me this when she came over. Thank you, Sam. Okay, so now we have Chinese celery leaves. Make sure to just get the leaves. Yeah, I definitely like the stems better. That is interesting. I can describe this one for you. So I don't know if you've ever had like a Chinese like the choy sum, or Chinese, like a Chinese kind of kale-esque type green. But this one is bitter, but I would argue that it is a little less bitter than the Western celery. It is bitter, but then it also tastes like a bitter green. Like it has that kind of like super chlorophyll-y, you know, if bok choy, if you've had like a very like green-esque bok choy, it has that kind of flavor to it. The bitterness is paired with the flavor of a green. And it does get quite bitter, but this one does not have that like numbing mintiness to it. Okay, I need somebody to confirm it for me, because I only bought one bunch of celery each, so I you know, maybe this is a special celery. You know, maybe the ground soil is completely screwed up and it's just a special celery. Yeah. Oh, I failed to mention the cost. So this probably has a lot to do with the fact that Chinese celery may be imported, or maybe just a whole lot less available in stores. This one, about 300 grams, 315 grams, cost me like £4.60 in Chinatown. So that was really expensive for what it was. There was like a big whole stock to it. It was like 60p, like 60 cents. At the grocery store. So in terms of availability and bang for your buck, obviously, if you're in a Western country, it may be this, but I guess maybe if you were in an Asian country, like maybe this is, you know, very, very readily available and also very inexpensive. So that is something to keep track of. Much easier. Yeah, this one's pretty much sweet now. Just like candy. That's how you should train kids. Have them eat all of these bitter things, and then when you give them vegetables, they're like, oh my gosh, this is so delicious. Like, hand them a carrot, they'll just go crazy. If this was cooked, I want to see how it tastes. So let me just cook this. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm just gonna cook this for like 30 seconds, and then we'll see how it tastes. Okay. Ooh. Okay, right off the press, still steamy. So I cooked this for about 30 seconds, as I had mentioned before, and we'll try the stalk stems first. It definitely, it smells a little bit celery-esque. I find that a little bit more of that kind of anisey flavor initially comes through, like what celery tastes like. It's a lot more mellow. Like there's still a bitterness, but that bitterness just tastes a lot more like if you've cooked greens, like if you've cooked like a kale green or like a mustard green, that bitterness very much has mellowed out and even sweetened up a bit, very much like when you cook greens. I realize some people don't cook greens as much as like Asian recipes do, but yeah, like the bitterness is now almost bittersweet in a way that greens taste when they are cooked. And then let's try the leaf bit. Leaf bit, still bitter. But I forgot. I don't remember exactly how bitter it was before, but it's still pretty bitter. It's still pretty bitter. And then it finishes off with like that tinge of like a celery flavor. So yeah, I think cooking it, of course, cooking things definitely mellows out the flavor. I'm sure if I had drank the liquid in which it was cooked in, I'm sure that we would have made up for that flavor. But yeah, yeah, cooking it makes things easier to eat. So yeah. Yeah, all right, that's it for me. It's like a lot of celery to eat for the day. So I hope you all enjoyed that. Give me suggestions. I'm always looking for it. What do you think I should be trying? What have you tried before that you're like, oh, she would really like this, or oh, this is a very unique ingredient, or I'd like to see her take on it, and what would she make using this, and something like that. So yeah, hope you all enjoyed. Happy Monday. I'll see you all again on some other Monday. Okay, bye.